Kantbot, hello, sir. Welcome to the kill stream. How you doing?
Hello?
Hello. How's it going, Kantbot?
It's a pleasure to be here, Rolf.
Thank you, man. So, you've never been on the show before. What I usually like to do with people who haven't been on the show before is let them introduce themselves to the kill stream audience.
I'd be happy to.
All right.
In 1892, there was a conference that was held in Geneva, and it was called the Geneva Nomenclature Congress. And it was at this convention that they came up with the idea of an organic compound, okay? And so the Rockefellers, who were big into the oil industry, they made most of their money transporting the oil through the railroads. So obviously back in those days, you know, they did what was called like surface mining of the oil. It was very abundant. You could just get it right off of the surface. Right. Just carry it in buckets, you know? And so in order to create a scarcity of oil at the 1892 Geneva Nomenclature Congress, Rockefeller actually sent people there to influence the result, to have oil classified as a fossil fuel. Do you follow me?
I'm following a little bit. Are you on an aircraft or what's going on here as well? I hear a little.
I'm fine, actually. I'm fine. But
okay.
So in 1892, when this happened, I mean, this created the idea that, okay, oil was an organic substance, right? And it was rotting flesh, rotting material from underneath the ground, that it was fossil fuel, quote unquote fossil fuel. I don't know why they called it fossil fuel.
Sure.
You know, it's just like this was what the public needed to hear in their mind.
It comes from the fossils of dinosaurs and shit, though, right?
No, that's actually
there weren't that many dinosaurs.
Ralph, that's actually not true.
Well, I just know what they tell me.
Yeah. As I'm saying, in 1892, that was the point of the Rockefellers trying to create scarcity for this, right? As they came up with this concept, they had oil, petroleum classified as an organic compound to create this myth that it was, you know, the result of rotting dinosaur flesh that was underneath the ground, and there was a limited supply of it. That's not actually true. The actual truth is that oil is you know, a naturally occurring geological substance. It's not an organic substance at all, right? It is created through geological processes. Do you understand?
Right. Yeah.
Heat,
yeah.
pressure.
Okay, sorry. But no, what I was just saying was, it's actually, this is what we would call the abiotic theory of oil. Russian geologists are actually very well versed in this. This is actually something that a lot of people don't know, is that in Russia, all the geologists are, you know, they prescribe to this theory of abiotic oil generation. Did you know that? I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Not really my strong suit topic, no, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the point is that oil actually occurs much deeper inside of the earth than what you would tend to believe. It occurs deeper in the levels of stratification within the earth than we have been led to believe. It's much lower. And it occurs through a natural geological process that produces this oil.
Right.
And actually, you know, people will say, right, that this oil is a, you know, organic compound. They'll find traces of little microbiotic life inside of the oil, and they say this is proof. But that's actually not proof at all. If you are familiar, I don't know, with the deep hot biosphere hypothesis, the idea of that is that there's actually a whole kind of substratum of life deep within the Earth that a lot of people, we don't even know about. We don't even know what the actual total biomass of this would be, obviously. And so this actually feeds on oil. So these little microscopic organisms actually feed on the oil that's produced deep within the Earth. And that the oil itself is not the result of any kind of organic process, but it's actually food for organic organisms.
All right. But how did we get here?
Let me just, you know, I just have a couple things that I want to say, Ralph, about this. Is that
sure? Go ahead.
So, organic oil theory, I mean, that has created a false sense of scarcity. It leads to the theory of peak oil, which is, obviously a complete falsity that was created by the government and by Rockefeller to, keep the oil prices high. I don't know. It's actually pretty devious how they did it, but they've actually done some experiments where they've drilled down to find oil deep below where any fossils should be. So they've gone back, in the stratification of the Earth way back in history to before there was all this life on Earth, and they still find oil. So oil really bubbles up. It seeps up from this geological process in this deep, hot biosphere, and it bubbles up, and that's how the wells get filled. So the wells, there's way more oil than we've been told. The oil
they've been lying to us.
Volume is way larger. So the peak oil theory is completely false. And another thing that I would like to talk about is that there is also some speculation. Where does, maybe this oil has a volition of its own. Are you familiar with this work? It's called Cyclonopedia. It's actually a very good book. I'd recommend it to your viewers. It's called Cyclonopedia. It's about oil. It's and about our conflict for oil in the Middle East. And so oil actually has, I think, of some scientists believe, a volition all of its own. And actually, oil may be directing human events, and especially the wars in the Middle East fought over oil. So not only is oil not an organic compound at all, or not an organic substance, it's actually an inorganic intelligence. That's something that, I don't know if the government wants you to know.
I would have to like a hive mind, or...
Yeah, I would probably have to press X to doubt on the oil being sentient, yeah.
I've looked into this a lot. There's a book out there that I'd also recommend. It's called Black Gold Stranglehold. That's one that I think that your viewers would find very, very interesting. So, I've gone to some different scientific conferences, especially in Russia, and this is actually the source of a lot of our geopolitical problems with Russia. So do you think that this is really being fought over, all this nonsense that we're always being told about? I don't believe so. I actually think that this is the secret war of the theories of oil, is that geologists are in control of both the Russian and the U.S. government, and they're fighting out a shadow war right now over these geological theories of oil. And so, obviously, I don't know if your viewers may be aware of this, but the U.S. geological industry, the academic industrial complex of geology, is actually heavily funded by the Rockefeller Foundation.
It seems to all go back to the Rockefellers. Yeah.
Well, obviously, the Rockefeller Foundation is one of the most important, nonprofit organizations in the history of the United States. So they've had a large influence on world events and on domestic policy. So they are actually heavily involved in maintaining this kind of like false hypothesis of biotic oil, which, as most evidence points that this is not true. So I don't know how aware you are of the history of these things. I think it's actually very interesting for your viewers to maybe know a little bit more about this.
Well, I think you just gave them a short lesson. Now, we also have callers as well. Somebody wanted me to ask you, actually, one of the producers here, wanted me to ask you about Stefan Molyneux.
I'm not aware of him. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in kind of like, geological theory and sort of the shadow war that's going on between geologists around the world over the control of oil and the theory of oil.
All right. Well, we have to mix in some other stuff.
Now, do you think that perhaps the oil might also be controlling? Because if the oil is an inorganic sentience, perhaps it has adapted the ability to directly affect the minds of those it interacts with.
Absolutely. This is a common, presumption that I would have. I mean, what do you think caused Gulf War syndrome? Especially when they were burning the petroleum wells, when they blasted the caps off. And you've probably seen the very striking photos about this from the Gulf War with the oil wells that were set on fire. So that was a lot of exposure to kind of, the psionic energy that's encoded within the oil. And one of the actual very interesting things that's economically been going on about oil recently is that, I don't know if you've been tracking the oil prices and seeing what's been going on with that, is that they've actually, we've had these incidents where all of a sudden now there's too much oil and the oil isn't being used up and the oil is overflowing reserve space. So it's actually caused oil prices to go down. In some cases they've even gone negative, which is amazing to think about, is that there's so much oil and the oil companies that are pumping it are actually paying people to take the oil away. And that's incredible when you think about it. Like, why would they even do that? That goes against all logic that you might have negative oil prices. So it's actually overflowing our reserve space of all of the tankers and all of the space where we can put the oil. That's, running out. And that the oil is seeping out into reality. It's actually permeating everything, taking control.
Right.
And we can't burn it fast enough or anything. It's actually insane.
All right. Hold up. Okay. All right, give me a second. Let me read these. 256B says, so oil is like the spice from Dune. Herod Silatiti says, bring back the bomber command.
Talk about Dune. That's actually an important.
Dune.
We'll talk about Dune.
Okay, let me read through these. We'll talk about Dune for sure. He said, bring back the bomber command sound. You don't have to worry about that. It came back. Terry J says, hi, Kantbot. Would you have rather met Adolf or Prince? Adolf Hitler or Prince the singer?
Who's that?
Would you have rather met Adolf Hitler or Prince the singer?
Who?
Hitler or Prince?
I know the music of Prince. I'm not familiar with the other person you listed.
Okay, Prince then. Prince it is. Okay. Okay, Kantbot, you said you wanted to talk about Dune.
Yeah,
Dune?
Are you familiar with Dune? I love that book. I think that's a
bit.
very accurate representation of history.
Yeah, a little bit. No, I'm not an expert though, really, but what did you want to say about it?
Well, I want to say that, yes, absolutely, the spice represents oil. That's one of the things I think the author Frank Herbert was trying to get at, is also the psychedelic properties of oil, like we were talking about before. Obviously, like it caused Gulf War syndrome is exactly what I was saying. And it definitely has mind-eroding and psychedelic properties to it when you get exposed to oil. This is, obviously why people huff gas. Have you ever huffed gas?
Not gas. I've huffed air duster before when I was a teenager.
Okay, so why?
I mean, I've smelled of gas and be like, oh, it's gas. Oh, wow, that's strong. Well, because I only did it a couple times. It gets you high. That's why.
See, that's the problem the Aboriginals have in Australia, is they've been huffing lots of petrol and they go completely crazy.
By the way, Chad, I'm sure you're stunned about my
academic podcast. I was told this was an academic stream. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I would recommend people don't huff.
You got told the wrong thing.
But there is a psychedelic property there in oil. So if it can be refined, obviously. I don't know if there's also another substance that's similar to a substance that's only found in certain animals called trillium D. But if you refine that sort of stuff, you can put it into your syringe. You can.
Are you flying in for a guest appearance on an academic podcast right now? Is that what you're calling us for? I'll take that as a yes. I'll have to mute that for a sec though. Okay, I'll take that.
Okay, so
take that as a yes.
You can inject the oil intravenously. You can put it right into your veins, and there is a lot of psychedelic properties that come with it.
I don't think so. I don't think that's true.
I mean, obviously, I wouldn't recommend you do that at home because you need some very sophisticated equipment. That's
I have to
something that the Russians have been working on. That's something that the Russians have been working on from my information that I've heard in my circles. I actually met Robert McNamara of the World Bank one time, and he was telling me a bit about that.
McNamara, he's been dead for like, I don't know, 15 years or so, probably.
Okay. So I guess they didn't let you in on that one. Maybe next time. But,
maybe next time. Okay.
So they have been developing this sort of technology. This was part of what MK Ultra was originally about. They went with LSD as a substitute because the oil was too uncontrollable. So they've been working on this for a very long time. Alan Dulles was a personal user of it. He got very heavily into, using petroleum psychedelic compounds and intravenously injecting it. A lot of people don't know that. He actually, he was a student of Jung, the Austrian psychologist. So he studied with him, and his wife actually did therapy with Jung. And so they were definitely talking about kind of the collective unconscious, kind of, that sort of theory. And I think that when they hit upon oil, and this is actually at when the U.S. Geological Survey went into Saudi Arabia to measure the oil fields there. This was before the Cairo Conference in World War II, and so they went into Saudi Arabia to actually measure how much oil was in the wells, right? And one interesting fact about that is that the pilot of that mission was this guy, Fletcher Prouty, who was later the director of strategic ops at the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff Office, he was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he has also commented on this. He has some videos on YouTube you can check out. You can look at Fletcher Prouty's oil theories and dig into that a little bit. And that's actually an interesting thing to look at. But beyond the point of that is that when they went to go and take measurements of the oil field, that's when they first started getting into all this, psychedelic. Petroleum.
Let me cut you there.
Actually really.
Go ahead, finish up your thought. Finish up your thought.
Okay, so they actually first hit upon this, and basically Fletcher Prouty, he told Alan Dulles about this mission because they had some kind of strange side effects. They were actually taking measurements, right? So he told Alan Dulles about this.
Look, audience, do not inject oil. Don't do that. It's gonna fuck you up. Don't do that.
I wouldn't tell anyone to do that because as I'm saying,
you seem to be pro injecting oil. That's all I'm saying.
If you're a Russian chemist who has the right equipment to refine this, none of your audience, I assume, is that. I wouldn't recommend that your audience try that, but. Yeah, under the supervision of someone with the right technology, part of this geological shadow war that I've been talking about. Yes, they do inject it into people, and especially soldiers. And this is actually one of the big causes of why a lot of U.S. soldiers, why suicide rates are so high, is because of the use of this psychedelic
Suicide
drug,
rate is about to go up after this show. Let me read these. Funger Rumpel says, best month ever. Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. I'll have to turn that down for a second. Okay. He says, so Kantbot saying oil basically Venom from Marvel. Is that a good way to describe it?
That's actually interesting. I mean, I don't personally, subject myself to the psychic poisoning of comic books or Marvel and try to. But if they are actually propagandizing these sorts of technologies, these narcotic psychedelic technologies based on deep biosphere abiotic oil, that's actually really interesting to put that out there on stream. So I'm not really sure what their plan or intention is with that. I'm not thrilled with it. I would hope that maybe your audience go look up Fletcher Prouty and read some of his videos.
I hope they'll go
maybe
there.
Learn more about this before just kind of like accepting this huge deception that's going on.
All right,
I'll go right away. I'm down.
Oh God, Andy, thank you. Good to hear your voice.
I'm gonna inject myself with some oil. I think you convinced me, Kantbot.
Wigger, baby.
How much technology is that? Do you have a laboratory that you're working with to do that? Because
he's a walking laboratory. He's a walking laboratory. What are you talking about? There's 15 different substances coursing through his veins at any given moment.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I mean,
he can handle it.
You already fucked up. I mean, whatever.
How did I fuck up?
I don't know who you are.
The gasoline will fix it. The gasoline will fix it.
That's Andy Worski. He's a co-host here on the show.
I've never heard of him.
Well, have you heard of him?
Maybe because you're flying around on that plane. Fucking what the hell?
All right.
Are you in a rocket or a plane? Where are you? Are you flying?
I'm totally okay.
No, are you flying? No, I mean a plane. It sounds like you're in a. Or are you near a giant fan? An oversized fan?
I'm fine.
No, I said, are you flying like in a plane?
I'm okay. I'm totally great. Thank you for asking.
FLY. Okay, what the fuck is that? He didn't fix.
You don't understand, Andy. We're on a secure channel. We're trying to make sure that the psionic oil can't spy on our conversation.
Are you
Also-
flying over Iraq right now?
Also, tell me when that ends because I can't have the beeping extended. I have
This
to turn
is
that
fucking
down.
fan posting. What is this?
Pencil
Yeah,
Cowboy
yeah.
says, "What's the deal with this lunatic? Turn off your bullshit." He calls you schizophrenic, and then he says something about a bullet. Yeah.
He's entering orbit.
Yes,
He's
Kantbot.
entering
Okay.
the atmosphere. I mean,
I'm gonna have
he's
to turn
leaving
that.
orbit.
I'm gonna have to turn that down. It's getting too loud.